It's Only Sport with Martin Devlin on The Platform. Brought to you by One New Zealand. Let's get connected.
Tony Kemp joins us, former Warriors coach, played his professional league, both hemispheres, 25 proud caps for the Kiwis. Tone, welcome back. Did Penrith deserve to win that game?
Oh, 100%, Marty. They were just so clinical last night. And, they talk all week about Melbourne's spine and how they were going to contain them, but defensively, Penrith were just on top of their game. And offensively, they just, tied out the main blokes and Jerome Hughes and Harry Grant. They really couldn't get a foot in the door all night, Melbourne.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to unpack from this, isn't it? But let's just talk about the defence to start with. Suffocating is how Ryan Pappenhausen described it afterwards. The commentators were all, even in the first half, saying Melbourne are gassed, Melbourne are gassed. What were Penrith doing to them?
Well, the main thing, Marty, is, when you step up the level of football, it tends to get a lot quicker. I remember this about Test match football, and what happened is that the back-to-back sets of six, and there were no errors, and you were just sitting there going, well, who's the first team to crack? And the way that Penrith were defending Melbourne when they did get into that good ball area, and it wasn't too often in the first half, they just looked really good. They would have been disappointed that Harry Grant snuck that try out of dummy half, but for the rest of the night, I just think defensively they were absolutely superb. And if you look at the main attributes of the game from Penrith's side of the game compared to Melbourne's, is if you look at the kicking game and you look at the big moments, like Jerome Hughes, his kicking game was very, very
it was off. It was off, yeah.
It was way off. But if you look at the way that they set their runners up, they would have spoken about it all week. Let's get to Harry Grant. Let's get to Jerome Hughes and tie them up. Cameron Munster tried to bring them back into the game and Pappenhausen in the second half, but just they were gassed. When you're talking about players who were gassed, were Harry Grant and Jerome Hughes, and they just couldn't get going. I mean, that kicking game at Cleary's and Luai's was just spot on all night. And then the big moments, the try before half-time.
Yeah, massive.
Was a real killer. And I just think that the way they set their other two tries up, it was on the back of tired defence. And, that's what happens when you're playing at that speed of the game. You're just waiting for a defender to make a really poor judgment. Walbrook made a really poor judgment coming in on Luai for that try down that left edge for Tavarua. And then, Nathan Cleary right on half-time where he's just skipped out to the outside and isolated Munster, where he was the best player on the field last night. Liam Martin picked up the Clive Churchill running through that hole. It just was like you were sitting there going, don't let them score before half-time because they will not let you back into the game, and that's exactly what they did.
I got to credit Luai as well for that switch of direction there, but the try to Taraba, I mean, explain that one. So it comes to Nathan, he turns his back on the defence, which drags almost two or three players in. It was a set play, a really clever move. But unusual that a set play like that, it's like scoring, the All Blacks scoring off a line-out. You kind of think that man-on-man defence should be able to cover that, Tony.
Well, the thing with it, Marty, is that as the game's getting on, you can see the players being left on the ground. And this is what Penrith were doing in Melbourne. They were getting out and you're just waiting for a player to make a poor decision. And the best thing about Nathan Cleary, look, I think Nathan Cleary last night became the Andrew Johns, the Jonathan Thurstons, the Cooper Cronks. I think last night was a defining moment for him when people said, is he really that good? I think when you look at him last night, busted, being able to do that to a team in a game when he's not even at 100% and win his fourth NRL championship, you have to put him right there in that mix. And the way that they isolate defenders and find them anywhere on the football field, both him and Luai, because Luai was outstanding last night as well. They just test your defensive line. They go one side, and because they're so smart, they go, well, actually, the numbers aren't here. They throw it back to the other side of the pitch. And you could pick any one of three or four players there that run onto that football, and they'll probably go through that try line. And that's what they did. They tired Melbourne out enough to get them a couple of times. And, I think, Marty, is thinking about it before you come on. I think that if any of those two teams played any of the other teams in the comp last night, they would have beaten them.
Yeah, they would have beaten them. Yeah, no question about it. And look, I was going to ask you about that, about going up a level. I'll just park that for a second. I want to talk about Brian Tall as well, because I love this guy playing for New South Wales. I don't believe he gets as much credit as he should. I think that second try was off the back of him, wasn't it? Making a barnstorming run of about 20 or 30 from the back. Man, he's like a miniature tank, isn't he? He's almost impossible to pull down because of his low centre of gravity. But what about the workload that guy got through?
Well, there would have been some targets in the grand final that Ivan would have set. He would have set up. You've got to look at Warbrick and Oates and Pepinelson at the back. So the week before they were absolutely outstanding against the Roosters, and he would have set the back three up and said, look, Tavarua, Brian Tall and of course Edwards, they had to outplay the back three. They had to get the forwards on a roll, so you can have the Leotas and the Fisher-Harrises and the likes coming through, the Yells coming through the middle of the park. And they won that battle hands down. Okay, so they won that battle. Even when Brian Tall went off late in the game, they had won the back three battle hands down. And of course, Brian Tall, he's been doing that for 4 years, so he was setting the tone. But it wasn't just Brian. And then your centres came in. I thought Targo was very good. I thought Alamotti, when he carried the ball, he was very hard to tackle. So it wasn't just their back three. Their back five just did an absolute number on the Melbourne back five. Young Howarth, I know he's only 21, the young Kiwi boy that's decided to play for Queensland, but he got isolated last night. He just happened to come up against Liam Martin, who was absolutely on fire, and of course Targle, the centre on that side, just had a field day up against him. It was just another step up from the week before. He'll be better for it, but when you're talking about Brian Tall and those back five players, Marty, that's really how they won the game. They won it right there when they got back into their kick returns, and of course Jerome Hughes' kicking game was off. They won that middle of the ruck.
Tony Kemp is with us. Tony, would Nelson have made a difference?
I think he would have made a difference as far as the defence goes, because Penrith, they have to get numbers into the tackles around him, and that may have been able to free up the likes of Jerome. You've got the Harry Grants and the Munsters and the Pepinelses, because when you get 4 or 5 tacklers in, it's going to create space elsewhere. But they were just so on last night as far as defence goes, Penrith. If you look at their scrambling defence and the way that they were shutting them down, and just look, it's a good comment from Pepinelson when he says they just suffocated us.
Yeah.
I think the suffocation started when they took their energy away by playing really up-tempo, quick, smart football, and Nathan Cleary's and Luai's kicking game was just on song. So the lack of errors, the speed it was played at, eventually you knew that they were going to get them somewhere. And of course people say that, they'll just continue to do the same thing, put it into the corners, try and strangle you. You've got to go them, punch for punch, because they'll throw a knockout punch like Nathan did just before half-time, and you have to be ready for it. And unfortunately for Melbourne, and I've got to look back at that game against Cronulla where they actually had that game the week before to Penrith. They were steeled and ready for it. They knew what Melbourne were coming, and they knew that Harry Grant and Jerome Hughes were two big parts of it. And I reckon by the 60th minute, both of those players were gassed. I remember looking at Harry Grant there on the 61st minute, and I've never seen him. He was down on his haunches, holding his knees, facing his own try line. And I went, he's gone. He hasn't got a replacement for him. Wishart was playing in the middle of the park, and he was gassed as well. So they did everything their coach had asked them to do. They did it to a T last night. And you just wonder how long, even with the loss of Luai and Fisher-Harris, who leave this year, you're only replacing a front rower, and they've got enough good halfbacks coming through. Actually, how long does this dynasty run? Because Nathan Cleary in that side, with Isaiah Yeo and the majority of the players still around him, Edwards at the back, man, they could go and do 5 in a row.
Was that a try for the Storm, Howarth, or?
I think so, Marty.
Yeah,
look,
all the commentators reacted like that, didn't they? And the very first angle I saw of it, I thought my initial reaction was try, because I thought a point of the ball touched it. And then obviously they say, the bunker's got 90,000 different angles. And I thought it was way too quick that they decided it wasn't a try. I mean, in rugby, that would have been 20 minutes and they probably would have undecided. But I mean, idea, okay. The other one is, in terms of the defence from Penrith, how about these for some stats? Beat the Roosters 30-10, beat the Sharks 26-6, beat Melbourne 14-6. So that's 22 points in 3 games at an average of 7. I go back to 2021 when they won the first of the 4 and they conceded 16, 6, 6 and 12. So again, after that first one, 6, 6 and 12. You see the pattern here. You know, defence wins championships. Is that term defined by what you saw last night?
Look, I think so. I think everyone knows that, you know, you've got to score points to win the competition, but it's the defence that stops it. And you've got the best spine in the competition, arguably in Melbourne, probably taking second seat to the Edwards, the Luais, and the Clearys last night. You know, even though I thought Penrith were busted up. You know, Liam Martin was carrying an injury, so was Cleary. Tall was carrying an injury into the game, and they. When you look at it and you're going, man, that's their 4th final. They were busted. You can't take away the last 3 finals, Marty, and just how they went about their business. You know, going into grand final week, just preparing themselves, getting themselves mentally right, knowing what it takes to win a football game. And it's like you went out there and, you know, it's like when you're standing with your mate in the back of school, you know, when you're starting, your testosterone's running high and you say, well, let's see who can stand here the longest when I punch you in the guts, you know what I mean? And the guy hits you in the guts. And we just stand there punching each other in the guts.
You do that in Vitra. We don't do that in Silvers. We don't do that in the Silvers. Yeah. We've got other things that occupy our time.
One of these caves over and goes, oh, no, that was too sore. Well, Penrith just keep punching him in the stomach. You know, they're going through the middle of the park. And you were looking at the game going, no, they've got him. You know, they've got him there. Hang on here. And Cleary's that smart. He found it. And for me last night, you know, like people have always said Cleary, he hasn't got to the Andrew Johns or the Jonathan Thurstons yet. And the argument they've got is because of international football. You know, well, they haven't got 4 premierships. Nathan Cleary's taken his club to 4 premierships. You've got to say last night he went a long way. If Liam Martin didn't get player of the day, Cleary would have got it. You know, if Liam Martin didn't have that game last night, Cleary would have got it. Last year he got it on his own, and I just think that argument now, is he actually as good as those other blokes? I actually think he could possibly become like the number 1 halfback Australia's ever seen.
I've got 2 quick questions to leave you with and get you out of here. All right, okay. Are they, and it's a strange question it might be, but are they humble enough? Are they gracious enough winners? You got Luai in everyone's face. You got Alamati, who did some grubby things last night. You got Liam Martin's the same kind of abrasiveness. Are they a humble enough side for you, Penrith, or doesn't that make dick all difference?
Well, it doesn't to them, and it's we're the era that I come from, Marty. It's annoying. You know, I actually, as soon as they won, I turn the TV off because I don't like seeing all that stuff. You know, I don't like the walking around and like hopping on a pedestal. And people say, look, let's celebrate our successes, but there is a bit of humility when you're doing that sort of stuff. So I don't like it, and I think it's filtered through Penrith, and it reeks of a little bit of arrogance. But hey, you know, like you're talking professional sport, and these guys that are in the limelight, and it's their pinnacle. You know, they play such a heavy set of rounds to get to that knockout round. You know, which is the grand final and win it, and they've done it 4 times in a row. I guess the question really that we should be asking is, you know, would people enjoy it with them more if they weren't so in your face, rubbing salt into the wound type thing? And for me, I personally, the way that they handle winning, I can't stand it. I think it reeks of arrogance. And but what you can't take away from them is they got 4 rings on their fingers. So, you know, they're the ones that say, well, and that's what comes out. I don't care. I've got 4 rings on my finger. You know, it's like Brodie Retallick's comment last week. You know, to the Irish, 4 more years. You know, Gregan comment, 4 more years. Like, if it was me, I'd be like, man, I just can't wait to get back out there and play.
Smashing, yeah. Winners the spoils. I mean, look, because remember last year it was, I think they were dancing in the face of Parramatta, or was it the year before they were dancing in the face of Parramatta? It might have been the second one that they won. So they lose a couple of players, mate, but they've lost players, and and not just players. When you lose Stephen Crichton and Coruscant, and you lose Kiko, and now they're going to lose Luai. These guys have won 3, 4, 2, 3 rings. That's real quality. You take that out of any team, any squad, and obviously the standard comes down, but not this lot. So the final question is, going back to what you were referencing, can they win 5 in a row? What does another team have to do? Because, remember this year, Tony, they had injuries. They lost their first couple of games. They weren't consistent at all. They looked as though they weren't the Penrith side, yet when it comes to the finals, they go bang into 5th gear, into 6th gear, and just seem to be a much better team than everyone else.
Well, Marty, I'm just going to take it back. I'm just going to roll it back because, this opens up a wider question. What a lot of people should really be looking at is that in the era of Andrew Johns, Cooper Cronk, the Jonathan Thurstons, Lockyer, you're looking at those type of players that were playing through that era. There was a heap of quality halves and hookers, yeah, and they went on, and the competition through the salary cap was changing all the time. When you're looking at these two top teams, they are the best spines in the competition. And if you look at the ones behind them, and this is a real worrying trend for the teams that are behind them, they don't have decent spines. They don't have quality halves, where you could look at, say, well, Jonathan Thurston will make sure that the Cowboys are there or thereabouts. Andrew Johns will make sure Newcastle is there or thereabouts. I think that Penrith and Melbourne have got a one hand already on the trophy at the start of 2025.
Wow.
And the reason I say that is I don't think there's enough quality 9s and 7s at the back of it. It's a real problem for the Warriors going into next year's competition. If you have a look at what they've got, you're like, well, are they as good as Melbourne or Penrith? Realistically, you'd have to say no. But you've got to say that about the other 15 teams as well. Like, are they going to be as good as what Penrith and Melbourne are in their spine if they get the rest of the players around them that can do the job that releases those players and can play that form like they did last night? So Penrith, losing players, no, they're not losing a spine. They're losing Jerome Luai. I think they replace. This is what I'm saying. Like, do they go for 5? They're losing Jerome Luai. I think it's easy to replace Fisher Harris. I think he's at the back end of his career. I think it's easy to replace Fisher Harris. And I think they've got another good young kid coming through in the 6th jersey that'll just step up, and away they go again. And I don't think the teams behind Melbourne and Penrith have got any backup that can keep with them next year as well. So, if you're looking for a punt, and they release the futures on the NRL next year, if you like Penrith or Melbourne, get on them as soon as they open in the beginning of the year.
Outstanding coverage all season, mate. Thank you so much for being with us every single Monday. It's been brilliant.
Cheers, Marty. I loved it.
Devlin.
That is a disgusting act.
The Platform.
It is always a pleasure, mate. And staying up late last night to watch that, because it is late in New Zealand. It finishes well after midnight. Jason, I'm still stunned, mate. I'm stunned because I just don't know how to absorb how good that Penrith side is.
Well, you're not alone, and there's a lot of people who've woken up this morning with a bit of shock and awe, and for good reason, because I didn't tip Penrith to win. There are a lot of people tipping Melbourne to win. A lot of people saying Penrith just can't keep this going in this salary cap era. Again, for those people who don't follow rugby league really closely, it's important that they know what I'm about to tell them. The salary cap provides for talent equalisation across the competition. This is not the Premier League. You can only spend what's been allocated by the governing body. And they have auditors, people who check up on this stuff. It's like the government checking up on people, whether they're rorting the system, if you like. And and other people listening to your show know that there's been a couple of incidents over the years, in fact, quite a lot, where clubs have rorted the salary cap and have copped the consequences. So in the salary cap era, to win 4 premierships in a row, this is the greatest run by any team since the great St George team of the 50s and 60s, when they won 11 grand finals in a row. Now, no one, I think, probably expected this to happen. Parramatta won 3 in a row back in the 80s with the likes of Sterlo, Brett Kenny, my good friend Ray Price, and on it goes. But to win 4 in a row in the current world that we live in, the world that we live in today, with the current arrangements. Like, that's the mind-blowing thing. And remember, Marty, if you and I did some homework today and we wrote down all the Penrith players that aren't with Penrith anymore, that play at other clubs here, there and everywhere, that's a pretty impressive team as well. So what Cleary is doing is quite remarkable. 5 grand finals in a row, 4 premierships on the trot. I was listening to Luke Lewis last night, and he's suggesting that they can keep it going.
Wow.
And on the flip side, Ryan Pappenhausen did an interview with Johnny Gibbs, the wonderful fellow that is Johnny Gibbs, radio broadcaster with another network, of course, in Australia. And he interviewed Ryan Pappenhausen after the game, and he used the word suffocating. Melbourne was starved of oxygen, if I could build on that comment. They were starved of oxygen, almost figuratively and literally. And I think, the better team won. Melbourne, there was some controversy with some stuff that happened, but you can't tell me that the better team lost the grand final.
No. Sure, no, hell no, mate. And, when you say suffocating, just in case people didn't watch the whole game, we're talking about the defence. Now, if you ever need a working definition of defence wins championships, sit down and watch this. I kept asking myself, and I kept boring my partner throughout the game, going, listen to the commentators. They were all saying to a man, they're gassed. And this was in the first half. And the reason is because they were just getting smashed and pounded and hounded and... Mate, it was relentless, wasn't it? There was a level of attack defence that I had not seen before all year from the Panthers last night.
Well, we had the best 2 teams in the competition squaring off for the ultimate prize on rugby league's biggest day. And I think people who didn't follow a team, like if your team didn't play last night, you would have been, I'll use that term again, in shock and awe with what was transpiring, particularly that first half, where there was nowhere to hide. It's one of the great grand finals, no doubt about it. I'm not going to try and say that it was better than 1989 with the Canberra Raiders and Steve Jackson and obviously Melbourne Storm winning 25 years ago, almost to the day, in that epic grand final against St George Illawarra, the Cowboys winning the way they did against the Broncos. But it was a fabulous grand final, and there was no shame for Melbourne losing last night. They had their moments. They had their chances. Would Nelson Asofa-Solomona have made some difference?
Yeah, well, it's a great question.
Well, possibly. It'll be talked about in years to come. But that's just the way the cookie crumbled. Scott Sorensen, the Kiwi international, obviously came back from injury, which was speculated during the course of the week with that hamstring problem. Remembering he didn't play in the finals at all, but came back, and so there was a reshuffle for the Penrith side, if you like. But what Cleary has done, that's Cleary Senior, the coach. I remember when I met Ivan when I was working for Sky Television, he was very reluctant to meet with media people such as myself. And I basically got in, if you like, because of our great friendship with Kevin Campion. And they came almost not directly as a pigeon pair, but they became great mates, and their wives and their families and so forth. And if you asked Ivan Cleary then, would you like to be a coach? I'm not sure if he would have been that keen on the idea. So his journey is remarkable, to say the least. Like what he has done and what he's been able to do with the people around him. He's had some smart cookies around him. He'd be the first to tell you that if he came on your program. But look, you've got to give the bouquets. You should bring up every florist in New Zealand today and send bouquets to Penrith because they deserve it.
Costo's with us, Jason Costigan, Costo's Corner every Thursday. You've done a brilliant job all year, mate, predicting round by round for us. Let's talk about Nathan Cleary now. And I was writing down a list of the greatest ever number 7s to play the game. He's obviously in there. I mean, he's got immortal next to his name, doesn't he, at some stage? And I was watching him last night thinking, this guy's not fully fit, Jason. We know that. He's been carrying that shoulder all year. But he's managed the workload throughout the playoffs and managed to still play. And he took it to the line. That's what got me last night. He didn't shirk or shy away from it. He actually ran more than he normally runs.
Well, I think you're right. And I'll look at it from the other angle. It's a shame that Cameron Munster didn't do a bit more of that as well and take the line on and whatnot. And it's all going to be ifs and buts now. Look, Cleary, what can you say about him? We could wax lyrical about him till the cows come home. You mentioned immortal. I want to temper your enthusiasm for this, because that ain't going to happen for quite some time. And there's a bit of a logjam of great players in front of him who have retired some time ago. And Cleary, the way he's going, if he looks after his body, we've seen players in more recent times playing on well into their 30s, and you know this, your listeners know this. So that will pan out in the years to come, probably in the 2030s, if we want to look into a crystal ball. I've been known to look at balls like that, and they've cracked from time to time. However, in this case, you might struggle to find someone to come on your program to say, Marty and Costo, they're off their head if they think Cleary's going to become an immortal. He will be part of this conversation in the years to come. And as I say, probably into the 2030s. He's got a lot more football left in him. I want to make the point too, though, he had some help this year in getting to this grand final, and because Cleary couldn't take the team to the grand final on his own. And Jerome Luai, remembering this was his last game last night for the Panthers, he wasn't the only person in that category either. Sunia Turuva comes to mind, departing the Penrith Panthers. Again, shedding players because of salary cap constraints. Luai's performances this year, particularly when Nathan Cleary was absent because of injury, were fantastic to share the load, to share the burden. So, in a tremendous roster, look, I can rave on about Liam Martin winning the Clive Churchill. Yeo could have won the Churchill and no one would have complained about it, but Liam Martin was, phenomenal player. And he comes from a little town that, for those people who love their harness racing, who listen to your program, Paleface Adios. If you don't know it, go and Google it. He comes from a little town called Temora. And Nixon Park is the local rugby league ground, the Temora Dragons. It's a feel-good story. There would have been thousands of people in not only Temora, but across the Riverina waking up this morning. Even people who don't follow Penrith, who would have felt good to see their local kid do good, winning the Clive Churchill as part of this Cinderella story with Penrith Panthers. And so, Liam Martin, congratulations to him on winning the Churchill. But a fantastic team performance last night, and richly deserved that four-peat. 5 consecutive grand finals. Absolutely amazing.
So I'm now sending him a personal invite, Nathan Cleary, saying you've won everything and everything and everything and everything. You've done it 4 times. How much longer? How about flirting with the other code, mate? Because there's an All Black jersey with a number 10 on its back waiting for you.
Marty,
hey, come on, just entertain the idea for a second.
Get him on your program, and if he was being really honest, and I'm happy to say I'm wrong, but you can get him on, and he probably wouldn't be so direct as me, but I think he'd find it boring.
Oh, look, mate, I think it's been a fantastic season, mate. And last night, as you say, I think awe and wonder is a great way to look at it. Because, again, you don't need 8 tries apiece to have a brilliant game of rugby league. No. What you need is these guys being so fully physically committed to trying to win a game that they're prepared to do anything possible to win that game. And look, and I'm glad it didn't have massive controversial moments. Yeah, there was that whether the ball was under, hit the try line, or whether his arm was under. But overall, I don't think you could also deny that Penrith deserved to win that. And just in terms of up another level from regular season into the playoffs, then I think that side went up another level again. Am I wrong seeing that? Because that's how I'm left after watching them defend like that. That I'm thinking, every other team in the comp, that's the level you got to get to. It's actually quite a way up there.
Well, it is. And you think, well, God help the West Tigers and Parramatta, because you look at what we saw last night and the level, the standard of play, the quality of play, the intensity of the play, and you look at the teams that were down there, scrapping for the wooden spoon. Big gap between top and bottom, isn't there? But look, there's people who last year thought that Brisbane would miss the finals. They were so close to winning the premiership. Penrith was so close to losing that grand final last year, but they got the job done. I might make the point too. One of the so-called experts in Sydney media did come out, and this was a story that we covered on rugbyleague.com with our news during the week. He actually came out something like 24 hours or so before the grand final, and he said of the modern era, of the current era in the NRL, this is the worst Penrith grand final team ever. So,
Okay. Great. Yeah. Brilliant analysis.
Go figure.
Yeah,
go figure. But look, a lot of I got it wrong too. I tipped Melbourne to win. I thought Melbourne, with Jerome Hughes and that spine with Pappenhausen at the back, and looking at Harry Grant, who got them off to a good start, albeit midway through that first half, because you thought, hang on, this is a stalemate. Who's going to crack first? it did take some time. Melbourne had their chances, but Penrith were just too good, and suffocating is the word. Like, they were just so professional and backed themselves even when they were down, and they just played a fantastic game of rugby league. And that defence, they say about defence winning big games. Well, last night was a tremendous example of that. Melbourne, they were gassed, Marty, and the better team won. And again, I think everyone in rugby league thinking, wow, just amazed with how Penrith can keep it going. And you'd be a brave man to say they can't do it again next year.
It's Only Sport with Martin Devlin on the platform. Brought to you by One New Zealand. Let's get connected.